Have you ever found yourself standing in the middle of nowhere, not just physically, but emotionally wondering if anyone would ever find you there? James Whitmore, a reclusive millionaire living in the snowy mountains of Montana, had mastered silence, a widower by choice. He built walls high enough to keep the world out, until one winter night a stranger knocked on his door. She was soaked from the storm. Her name was Claire. She said she was lost. But was she? What would you do if someone entered your quiet life, carrying secrets, pain, and a truth so heavy it threatened to unravel everything you'd carefully kept hidden? Would you let them in? Would you risk the fragile peace you fought to protect, just for a chance to feel alive again? This isn't just a love story. It's about healing, about the people who enter our lives not to fix us, but to sit beside us in the dark until we remember how to reach for light. Take a deep breath. Let's begin. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more soulful stories to life. The wind howled across the Montana mountains like a chorus of old ghosts, scraping ice against the windows of James Whitmore's timber-framed cabin. Snow fell in thick, merciless sheets, swallowing the narrow road that wound its way through the trees and up toward his solitary home. He hadn't expected anyone tonight. No one ever came this far. Not anymore. James, 53, tall and broad-shouldered, stood by the stone fireplace, a wool sweater pulled tightly around him. The fire crackled, casting flickers of orange across his weathered face. He was the kind of man who carried stillness like armor, every movement deliberate, every silence earned. His cabin smelled faintly of cedar and old records. Most of the time, he preferred the quiet. It kept the memories from echoing too loud. But then a knock, not loud, not hurried, just hesitant. James turned sharply toward the door, unsure if he'd imagined it. He hadn't. Another knock, 3 times. He opened it slowly, half expecting to see nothing but wind. Instead, there stood a young woman, no older than her early 30s, soaked to the bone, hair tangled from the storm, her coat cheap, thin, and far too light for Montana. In December clung to her like a second skin. I'm sorry, she stammered, her lips trembling. My car spun off the road. No signal. I saw your lights. I didn't know where else to go. For a moment, neither moved. James stared at her, then past her, at the snow beginning to bury the forest behind. He could send her back. He could close the door, pretend no one came, but he didn't. Come in, he said quietly, stepping aside. The woman crossed the threshold, her boots leaving a trail of slush on the wooden floor. James shut the door against the roar of the storm and took her coat, hanging it near the fire without a word. She looked around stone, wood, warm light, a piano pushed into the far corner, its cover dusty. She hugged herself, shivering. I'm Claire, she said, voice soft. He nodded. James, she smiled faintly. Thank you for letting me in. I didn't expect, well, anyone out here. He poured hot coffee into a chipped mug and handed it to her. She cradled it like it was the first warmth she'd felt in days. I was heading west, she explained, after a few sips. Didn't think the weather would hit so fast. James didn't press. People showed up in storms for all kinds of reasons. Some of them wanted to disappear. Some already had. "I have a guest room," he said. "Heat's not great, but the bed's clean. You're welcome to stay the night. Roads won't clear till morning." Claire looked up, eyes wide with gratitude. That would mean a lot. Later, after she'd showered and changed into the flannel shirt and sweatpants he offered, they sat in the living room, sipping more coffee. Outside, the wind battered the eaves, but inside, the silence between them softened. Claire gazed at the snow through the frosted window. "It's funny. I thought I came out here to escape something, but now that I'm here, I think I was just hoping someone might open a door." James didn't respond, not right away. He understood. His wife, Maggie, had passed 5 years ago. Car crash. A winter storm not unlike this one. For months, people offered comfort, words, casseroles, but not space, not silence. And so he came here to the woods, the snow, the quiet. Sometimes, James said slowly, doors only open in the middle of a storm. Claire looked at him then, really looked, and for a second the room felt smaller, more intimate. She leaned forward slightly. "Do you live here alone?" He nodded. "By choice. But maybe not always." He didn't answer. She didn't push. They talked for a little while longer about music, about the snow, about the way cities seem to blur people into ghosts. Claire's voice was gentle, her laughter hesitant but real. She touched the piano as she passed it, almost reverently. "You play?" James asked. "Used to," she said, then hesitated. "A long time ago." James didn't ask why she stopped. At midnight, she rose, thanked him again, and disappeared into the guest room. He stood by the fire, watching the flames dance. The house felt different. Not fuller exactly, but less hollow. In the quiet, he whispered, "Welcome back." Sound. Outside. The storm raged on. Inside, the first ember of something long forgotten began to glow. The morning arrived not with sunshine, but with a pale, diffused light that filtered through the snow-covered windows. The storm had eased, but thick drifts blanketed the land like a heavy sigh laid across the mountains. James rose early, as always, his footsteps quiet on the old wooden floors. For years now, his mornings had been solitary, filled only with the soft hiss of the kettle and the whisper of wind through pine trees. Today was different. Claire hadn't come out of the guest room yet. He didn't expect her to. She had arrived half frozen, shaken, carrying more than just a soggy coat and tired eyes. She'd carried silence, a kind of quiet that wasn't just from the cold, but from something buried deep within. James poured 2 mugs of coffee, placing one on the table for her. He left it untouched and warm, like a peace offering without words. It wasn't long before she appeared hair-damp, tucked behind her ears, his oversized flannel shirt still draping over her slight frame. She looked around shyly, as if unsure whether she'd imagined the kindness from last night. "You didn't have to make coffee?" she said softly. "I always do," James replied, nodding towards the chair across from him. "It's just habit." Claire sat down, wrapping her hands around the mug. Her fingers were slender, pale, and a little shaky. James noticed, but said nothing. For a while, they just sat. No conversation, no pressure, the kind of silence that doesn't scream, but hums gently between 2 people who understand the value of stillness. Outside, the snowplow hadn't come. The road was still impassable, but neither of them mentioned it. "You live far from town," Claire finally said, her voice still hoarse from yesterday. "I prefer space," James answered. She tilted her head. "From what? From noise? From people asking too many questions?" Claire gave a half smile, not quite reaching her eyes. "I used to think space meant freedom. Lately, it just feels like drifting." There it was again, the ache in her voice, the weight. James leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping the ceramic mug. "You don't have to talk about anything you don't want to." Claire looked at him, then really looked. "But what if I want to talk?" And I've forgotten how that stopped him. He wasn't used to vulnerability, not in others, and certainly not in himself. For years, he'd mastered the art of polite detachment, nods, small talk, quick escapes. But Claire wasn't offering small talk. She was offering a fracture, a tiny crack in the shell. "Then maybe," James said carefully, "you start with something small, something that doesn't matter." Claire took a sip of her coffee. "Okay. I used to love peach jam, the kind that came in little jars with handwritten labels. My grandmother made it every summer." James nodded. "Good start." She smiled faintly. "Your turn." He hesitated. Then, "I can't stand cilantro. Tastes like soap. Always has." Claire let out a soft laugh, surprising even herself. "Well, we can't share tacos." Then they both chuckled, and for a moment the kitchen felt warmer, not from the fire, but from the simple, shared absurdity of two people pretending to be normal in a world that hadn't been kind. Claire stood and walked to the window, pressing her hand against the frosted glass. The forest outside was still, blanketed in white. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" she asked. James didn't answer right away. He stared into his coffee like it might contain the truth. "I used to," he admitted, "but now I just feel quiet. There's a difference." Claire turned to face him. What happened to her? That question sat between them like a ripple in still water. "She died," he said. "5 winters ago." Claire's eyes softened. "I'm sorry." James nodded. "I don't talk about her much." "I can go if it's too much," Claire offered gently. But James shook his head. "No, stay. Later that afternoon." James stepped outside to shovel the path to the garage. The snow was thick and heavy. Each lift of the shovel echoed in the cold air. From the window, Claire watched him, her breath fogging the glass. He moved with calm strength, like a man who didn't rush anything, but didn't quit either. Something about that steadiness pulled at her. When he returned inside, cheeks red from the cold, Claire handed him a towel and pointed toward the couch. "Sit. I'll make you something hot. You cook?" "No." She grinned. "But I make a mean instant oatmeal." She returned with 2 bowls, and they ate on the couch shoulders, nearly touching, the radio playing soft jazz in the background. That evening, Claire sat at the piano. She didn't open it, just let her fingers trace the keys through the closed lid. "You can play, can't you?" James asked. "I could," she replied, "a long time ago." "Why'd you stop?" Claire looked down, her voice barely audible. "Because I forgot how to feel the music." James watched her for a long moment. "Maybe you just didn't have anyone listening." She didn't reply, but something about the way she smiled told him that his words had landed somewhere deep. Snow continued to fall in a whisper, coating the forest in a thicker hush than before. By mid-morning, The cabin felt like a floating island, untouched, unseen. James moved through it with quiet intention, lighting the fireplace, checking the pipes, folding extra blankets. Claire followed him sometimes, but mostly she observed. She was beginning to learn his rhythms, the way he opened doors gently, the way he always filled the kettle, even when no one asked for tea. After lunch, grilled cheese and canned soup. Both better than either of them admitted, Claire wandered into the study. The room was filled with books, framed photographs, and records stacked by genre. In the corner stood a dusty, upright piano, its finish faded but still sturdy, still proud. She touched the edge of the piano, running her fingers along its frame like greeting an old friend she wasn't sure she could trust again. "Go ahead," James said from the doorway. "It still plays. Needs tuning, but it works." Claire turned to him. "How long has it been since someone played it?" He stepped in, eyes fixed on the piano. "Since Maggie died." Claire hesitated. She played. James nodded. She taught music at the high school. Every morning, she'd start her day here. Bach, Debussy, sometimes old Billy Joel just for fun. Claire smiled faintly. "She sounds wonderful." She was, James said, simply. The music stopped when she did. Claire sat on the piano bench, but didn't open the lid. It's hard, isn't it, when something you loved becomes a reminder of everything you've lost? James didn't answer. He didn't need to. She looked up at the shelves above the piano family photos, a wedding picture, Maggie with short blonde hair, and the kind of smile that made you believe in summer. Claire reached for a small leather-bound book tucked between the photo frames. It wasn't a journal, but a music notebook. Inside were pages of handwritten compositions. She wrote her own music, Claire whispered. James nodded. Mostly for fun. She used to joke that if her students ever listened, she'd be a Grammy winner by now. Claire flipped gently through the pages until one caught her eye. Morning Light, a delicate arrangement with fluid notes and phrasing. "I know this piece," she said, surprised. "You do?" Claire nodded. "I played it years ago at Juilliard." James blinked. "Wait, you studied music?" She looked away, then back. "I did. Piano performance. Graduated top of my class. Then I just stopped." Why Claire closed the book slowly? Because when music became work, it stopped being healing. And after everything, I didn't think I deserved it anymore. James didn't press, but his expression shifted. Something tender, something wounded. They stood in silence until Claire slowly opened the piano lid. Her fingers hovered over the keys like birds, uncertain where to land. She pressed the first chord. It rang out sharp, slightly out of tune, but real, and it echoed. Claire hesitated, then began playing Morning Light. The melody trembled at first, but as she found her footing, it began to bloom like a beam of sunshine filtering through grief. James stood still, watching as the notes spilled through the air, curling into corners of the house that hadn't heard music in half a decade. When she finished, neither of them spoke for a moment. Then James whispered, "I didn't know how much I missed that." Claire smiled. "It's a beautiful piece." He looked at her. "So are you." She froze just for a beat, but instead of deflecting or shrinking, she held his gaze. "Thank you," she said. That night, the wind picked up again, rattling the windows like loose memories. James found Claire curled up on the couch, flipping through Maggie's music notebook again. "You can keep it," he offered. "No," Claire said gently. "It's yours. But maybe I can copy a few pieces, if that's okay." James nodded. Before heading to bed, she turned at the hallway's end. "James, yeah, thank you for not asking too much. Most people want to dig into your pain like it's their business." James offered a quiet smile. "I've learned pain doesn't come out clean. Better to let it breathe than force it out." Claire looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing something. "I wasn't just passing through," she said finally. "When I found your house. I wasn't just lost." James's face didn't change, but something inside him stilled. Claire added, "I'll explain. Just not yet." He gave a slow nod. "Whenever you're ready." She disappeared down the hallway, her footsteps soft, her presence lingering like a half-finished song. The storm had passed, but the chill lingered. That evening, the fire burned brighter than usual, crackling, alive, casting soft shadows across the walls like old memories trying to speak. James and Claire sat close by, mugs of warm tea in hand, wrapped in the quiet that had slowly turned from unfamiliar to comforting. "I used to be afraid of silence," Claire admitted, her eyes fixed on the flames. "Thought it meant no one cared." James glanced at her, then back at the fire. "And now I think silence might be the only place where you can really hear yourself." James gave a quiet nod. That made sense to him, more sense than most things. Claire sat cross-legged on the couch, wearing wool socks and one of James's oversized cardigans. She looked different than when she arrived, less like someone lost, more like someone slowly remembering herself. "You're good at this," she said suddenly. "At what? Letting people just be." James smiled, faintly. "Took a while to learn. You grow up thinking fixing is love. Turns out, it's usually just control dressed in kindness." Claire looked at him for a long time. "Someone tried to fix you. Everyone tries, especially after a loss. But sometimes all you need is for someone to sit with you in the ashes." She nodded, and for a few heartbeats, neither spoke. Then Claire leaned forward, resting her head against her knees. Her voice was softer now, more hesitant. "There's something about this place. It makes me want to tell you things I haven't told anyone." James didn't move. "You can." She didn't reply right away. Instead, she stood up and walked toward the window, the cold light painting her profile in blues and silvers. "I wasn't just escaping the storm," she said finally. "I was escaping someone who thinks I still belong to him." James's jaw tightened slightly. "Someone. Dangerous." Claire nodded. "We weren't married, but it felt like I owed him something I couldn't give anymore. He used to call me his muse, said he made me. That without him, I was nothing." James stood slowly. "Did he hurt you?" Claire's silence was answer enough. "You don't owe him anything," James said, voice low and steady. "I know," she whispered, "but when you hear a lie long enough, part of you starts to believe it's your own voice." James crossed the room, stopping just a few steps behind her. "You're safe here. No one gets in unless you open the door." She turned, eyes rimmed red. "Thank you." Before either of them could say more, a sharp buzz echoed through the room. James's satellite phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. He picked it up, frowning. "I rarely get calls on this," he muttered. The screen flashed unknown number. He answered, "Hello." There was a pause. Then a male voice came through, smooth, composed. "Is this James Whitmore?" "Yes. Who's this? I'm looking for someone. Claire Bennett. She might be with you." James's eyes flicked to Claire, who froze like a deer in headlights. "Who is this?" James asked again, sharper this time. The voice continued calmly. "My name is Adam Cross. I'm her fiancé." Claire stepped backward, breath caught in her throat. "I think there's been a mistake," James said coolly. "She isn't engaged. Mr. Whitmore." Adam replied, too calm, too practiced. "Claire has some episodes. She gets confused. She's been under treatment. I'm just trying to bring her home safely." James felt something dark coil in his chest. "She's not confused," he said, "and she's not going anywhere unless she wants to." "Is that what she told you?" Adam asked, tone condescending. "Please ask her about the hotel in Boston, the press scandal, the suicide attempt. Ask her who she really is." James hung up. Claire's hands were shaking. She looked like she was about to vanish into herself. "I can explain," she said quickly. "Please, James, I can explain." He didn't say anything, just watched her, 1,000 questions, fighting for space behind his calm exterior. "I never lied about the pain," she said, "or about him. But I did lie by omission. I didn't tell you everything because I didn't want you to look at me like everyone else does." James's voice was low. "And how is that? Like I'm broken. Like I'm a project. A mistake wrapped in good intentions." James turned away, ran a hand through his hair. "Claire," he said quietly, "I don't care about your past, but I care that you didn't trust me with it." "I was scared," she whispered. "Scared that if I told you everything, this place, this peace, would vanish." James looked at her, his voice tight. "You found peace on a lie. That's not peace. That's borrowed time." The fire cracked again. The silence this time wasn't soft. It cut. Claire stepped back. "I should leave. You can't drive." "The roads I'll walk, then just let me go." James didn't move. He didn't stop her. She disappeared into the guest room. The door clicked shut. James stood in the living room, the fire now a dull glow, its warmth no longer reaching him. And for the first time since she arrived, the cabin felt cold again. The cabin was darker than usual that night. James stood in the hallway, unmoving, his hand still curled from where he'd held the phone. The conversation with Adam Cross echoed in his mind, not just the words, but the certainty in the man's voice, the way he spoke about Claire like she was some wayward possession. Behind the guest room door, silence stretched long and heavy. James could hear her breathing steady, but strained. He imagined her sitting on the edge of the bed, hands clenched, back hunched, under the weight of everything unsaid. He knocked once, gently. "Claire," he said. A pause. "Come in." He opened the door slowly. She sat in the same spot he'd pictured, her eyes red but dry, her body stiff like a sculpture made of glass. "I need you to tell me the truth," James said, voice calm but unreadable. Claire didn't look at him. She stared at the carpet, then up at the window, where snow still drifted like ash. "I wasn't running from a storm," she began. "I was running from a man who made me forget who I was." James didn't interrupt. Claire's voice was low, deliberate. "Adam Cross was never my fiancé." He was my manager, my partner, musically. At first, he found me when I was fresh out of Juilliard, and he made me famous. She laughed bitterly. And then he made me small. James stepped inside, pulling the door halfway shut behind him. Claire kept going. He said I was brilliant because of him, that every standing ovation belonged to him, not me, that without him I'd be nothing but a girl with a pretty dress and a good memory. She took a breath, her shoulders trembling. I stayed because I didn't know how to leave. Every time I tried, he'd remind me how the press would eat me alive, how the donors would turn, how the world would believe him. James sat on the edge of the bed, a careful distance away. "And Boston?" he asked gently. Claire nodded. "I had a breakdown during a rehearsal. He leaked it to the press, told them I was unstable, said I needed rest." James felt his chest tighten. "They called it a suicide attempt," she whispered. "It wasn't. I wasn't trying to die. I just didn't want to feel anything anymore." She looked at him finally. "I came here because I needed to disappear from that version of me, because every place I knew felt poisoned. And me," James asked, "was I part of that escape?" Claire flinched. "No! You were the only thing that felt real, the only person who didn't ask for a version of me." James rubbed a hand across his jaw, thinking, "Then why didn't you tell me? Because I thought if I brought that world into yours, it would infect it too? And I couldn't stand the thought of this place, this peace being another casualty." James looked at her, eyes quiet but piercing. "Claire, trust is not a luxury. It's the only bridge between two people. If it breaks," she cut in, not with anger, but desperation, I know I broke it. But please don't look at me like I'm some helpless thing. I've clawed my way back piece by piece." Her voice cracked. "And I'm still not whole, but I'm trying." James stood and walked to the window, staring out at the ghostly trees. His breath fogged the cold glass. "I've lived in silence for 5 years," he said. "I told myself it was healing, that the quiet would protect me." He turned to face her. "But maybe I've just been hiding too." Claire looked down, tears threatening. "Do you want me to go?" James walked over, knelt before her, and gently took her hands. "I want the truth," he said, "even if it's messy, even if it hurts." She nodded slowly. "Then I'll give it to you." There was a pause, and then, unexpectedly, Claire let out a small, tired laugh. What James asked, puzzled. "I just realized," she said, eyes wet, "I never hated the piano. I hated how I was forced to use it. But now, when I played Maggie's piece, it felt like mine again." James gave a soft smile. "Maybe that's the beginning." Claire looked at him, her hand still in his. "And maybe this is too." That night, they didn't share a bed, but they shared something deeper, a fragile, renewed honesty, the kind of truth that's earned, not demanded. James brought an extra blanket to her room, leaving it folded at the foot of her bed. Before he left, she whispered, "Thank you for listening." James paused at the door. "Thank you for trusting me." Outside, the wind had stilled. Snow fell softer now, like feathers instead of knives. Inside, two people broken in different places were slowly learning how to rebuild. The next morning brought a strange peace, like the house had exhaled after holding its breath all night. The light filtering through the windows was softer, warmer. The storm had passed, but something else had shifted too. The silence between James and Claire no longer carried tension. It carried space. Space to breathe. Space to begin again. James found Claire in the study, standing in front of the piano. She wasn't playing, just standing there, hands resting lightly on the edge, her expression unreadable. The same way someone might stand before a grave or a doorway. "Good morning," he said gently. She glanced back, smiling faintly. "I didn't sleep much." "Me neither." Claire traced her fingers along the wood grain. "I keep thinking about that piece. Maggie's Morning Light. I don't know why, but it stayed with me." James stepped closer, watching her. "Maybe because it's more than a song." Claire looked at him. "It's a memory," he said, "of someone who believed in beauty even when the world felt cold." Claire pressed one key. It rang out, slightly off pitch, but alive. "I want to play again," she whispered. "But I'm terrified." "Of what?" "Of finding myself in the music again, and not liking what I see." James walked over, pulled the bench out slowly. "Then start with something that doesn't ask too much. Something soft." She hesitated, then sat. Her fingers hovered above the keys like birds afraid to land. She pressed a single note, then another, and slowly she found a melody. Not a song, just a sketch. Notes meandering, incomplete, but full of breath. James sat on the floor beside the piano, back against the bookshelf, watching her. Claire's eyes were closed now. Her body swayed slightly, as if guided by something beyond herself, something deeper than memory. When she finally stopped, the room felt warmer somehow. "That," James said softly, "was beautiful." Claire opened her eyes. "It wasn't even anything. It was you. And that's enough." She gave a tearful smile, one hand still resting on the keys. Later that day, they ventured outside for the first time in days. The world was white and clean, like someone had wiped the slate clean with snow. They didn't say much as they walked the narrow trail behind the cabin, but their hands brushed once, then again, and finally stayed together. Claire tilted her head back, catching snowflakes on her lashes. "I used to dream about vanishing," she said, "about being so far off the map no one could reach me." James squeezed her hand, and now she looked at him, eyes soft. "Now I want to be found." That night, they lit candles instead of overhead lights. James brought down an old vinyl of Maggie's favorite jazz trio. The music filled the room, low and warm, like breath over skin. Claire picked up a sketchbook James had left on the coffee table, mostly empty pages, a few scrawled music bars, and 1 or 2 lines of poetry. "You write?" she asked. "Sometimes." He shrugged. "When I can't sleep?" She read one aloud, softly. "A house is not a place. It's the silence that lets 2 heartbeats echo without fear." Claire looked at him. "That's not nothing." He gave a sheepish smile. "Didn't say it was good. It's honest. That's rarer." They stayed up late, talking about everything and nothing. Claire told stories about her childhood in Vermont, how her father built her first piano bench out of scrap wood. James shared about the time he tried and failed to build a treehouse for his niece, ending up with a 1-level platform and a broken hammer. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't grand, but it was enough. When midnight came, Claire stood to head to her room. She paused at the hallway. "James!" He looked up. "If I play again, really play, will you listen?" He didn't hesitate. Always. And for the first time since she arrived, Claire smiled, without fear in her eyes. The snow had melted just enough for the road to reveal its edges. By midweek, the mountain pass was reopened, and with it came the first delivery truck in days, a lone vehicle rumbling up the gravel path, leaving muddy tracks behind. Claire stood at the window as it passed, hands tucked into the sleeves of her sweater. She didn't wave. She didn't speak. She just watched it disappear around the bend like an omen she'd been waiting for. That evening, James found her in the kitchen, washing dishes by hand, even though the dishwasher was empty. "I called a friend," she said without turning around. "He's driving up from Portland tomorrow. I'll be leaving with him." James stood still. His heart didn't race, didn't drop, it simply clenched. Why, Claire turned off the faucet. Her hands trembled slightly. "Because I need to face the world again, on my own terms. I need to know I can walk back into it without losing myself this time." James walked to the counter, leaning on it with both hands. "I understand," he said, and he did. But it didn't make it easier. Claire met his eyes. Being here, it's given me more than I can explain. You've given me more." James nodded slowly. "But you're still going." She stepped closer. "Not because I want to leave you behind, but because I don't want to hide behind you either." Silence stretched. James picked up a towel, dried a dish she hadn't finished. "I want to be clear," he said, folding the towel neatly. "I don't want you to go, but I won't stop you." Claire's eyes shimmered. "That's the kindest thing anyone's ever done for me." They didn't sleep much that night. Instead, they sat by the fire one last time, sharing a blanket, shoulders touching. Claire rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you think we'll find each other again?" James didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for her hand and placed it over his chest. "You're already here," he said, "and I'm in yours. That's how we'll find each other." The next morning was crisp and golden. Sunlight glinted off the snow like shards of old stars. Claire stood at the threshold with her backpack slung over one shoulder, scarf wrapped tightly around her neck. James walked her to the car, waiting by the tree line, a forest-green Subaru, driven by a middle-aged woman with a kind face and a no-nonsense expression. A friend of Claire's, apparently. Someone James would never know, but trusted in that moment simply because Claire did. They stood by the steps, neither speaking. Claire turned to him, eyes filled with something too full for words. "If you ever come to Portland," she began. He cut in softly. "I won't just come. I'll look for you." She nodded, a tear sliding down her cheek. James brushed it away with his thumb, then leaned in to press his forehead gently to hers. "You're strong," he whispered. "Don't forget that." "You too," she replied, "but don't hide behind it." Their hug was quiet, desperate in its stillness. Then she pulled away, walked toward the car, and didn't look back. James stood there long after the vehicle disappeared into the tree line. That evening, he returned to the piano. He opened Maggie's notebook, found the piece Claire had played, and rested it on the stand. His fingers, long unused for music, found their way clumsily onto the keys. He played the first few notes broken, unsure, but the melody was there, like Claire, like hope. Spring arrived late in Montana. The snow didn't melt, it surrendered. Bit by bit, it pulled back from the trees, the roof, the winding roads that had gone unused for too long. Wildflowers peeked through patches of soft earth. Birds returned in pairs. Even the air smelled different, less like survival, more like renewal. James Whitmore moved through his cabin with quiet purpose. The same daily rituals: firewood, tea, letters left unsent on his desk. But everything had changed since Claire left. It had been 72 days. He knew because he counted. Some nights he played Maggie's piano. Other nights he sat on the back porch with a blanket and a single cup of coffee, looking up at the sky, wondering where Claire was and if she missed him like he missed her. One morning, an envelope arrived. No return address. Portland postmark. Inside, a music score, Claire's handwriting. A new composition titled Between Storms. At the bottom, just 5 words. If you play it, I'll come. James didn't think. He just packed. It was early June when he arrived in Portland, stepping out of the train station into a world buzzing with life. He didn't know where she lived. He didn't have her number, but he had her music, and somehow that was enough. That evening, he found a small community hall hosting a local recital. Children playing cellos and violins, nervous parents clapping at every note. And there at the far end of the room, Claire sat at a piano, not center stage, not announced, just present. She didn't see him at first. Her eyes were closed, body swaying gently as her fingers danced through a melody James didn't know but instantly felt. It was her, every note, a step closer. When she looked up and saw him, her hands froze mid-phrase. She didn't cry. She smiled, and that was more powerful than any tear. After the recital, they stood beneath a maple tree outside, golden light spilling between the branches. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she whispered. "I wasn't sure you'd mean it," he replied. "I did. Every note." James took her hand. "I played it." Claire squeezed his fingers. "I felt it." They didn't need apologies. They didn't need speeches. They just needed time. 3 months later, James hosted a piano workshop at the Montana Community Center. He helped fund. Claire led the sessions, teaching children to find their voice through melody. James tuned the pianos, repaired broken pedals, took pride in every smile she coaxed from young faces. Their life was quiet, but it was rich. One autumn evening, under a canopy of amber leaves, Claire looked at James from across the porch. "Do you think love always looks like this?" she asked. He tilted his head. "Like what?" "Like healing, like coming home, not losing yourself." James thought for a moment, then said, "I think real love doesn't ask you to be less. It asks you to be more of who you really are." Claire stood, walked over, and placed her forehead gently against his. "Then I'm home." That winter, James gave her Maggie's notebook. "I think she'd want you to have this," he said. Claire pressed it to her heart. "I'll add to it," she whispered, "but I'll keep her voice in the margins." And James knew then they were no longer living in borrowed time. They had built something lasting, not perfect, but honest, and that was enough. Sometimes the most profound connections begin not with grand declarations, but with quiet moments shared in silence. This story reminds us that healing doesn't always come through fixing or saving, but through choosing to stay, through listening, through letting someone unfold at their own pace. James and Claire didn't rescue each other. They offered space, respect, and slowly trust grew in that space. It teaches us that even after heartbreak, solitude, or shame, we are still worthy of being seen and known. That love, real love, asks not for perfection, but for presence, for older hearts. This story is a gentle reminder it's never too late to begin again. Not in love, not in life. Sometimes all it takes is opening one door, one time. And when you do, you might not just welcome someone else in. You might welcome yourself home. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of something you've felt, or someone you've lost or found, please consider giving it a like, sharing it with someone who might need it, and subscribing to our channel. Every gesture of support helps us keep telling stories that heal, connect, and inspire. We're grateful to have you here. Until next time, stay kind, stay open, and stay human.